This is a Porsche 918 Spyder. Of course, you already knew that because the 918 Spyder is one of the most exciting, thrilling, and widely covered cars manufactured in the last 25 years. When these things were new, they sold for just a hair over $1 million. And today, the average asking price for a 918 Spyder on AutoTrader is $1.7 million for a car. Today, I traveled to Nashville, Tennessee, and I borrowed this 918 from a viewer who's on Instagram as Mazur327. You can follow him if you click the link in the description below. And you should follow him because, I mean, the guy's got a 918 Spyder and a 911R. Do you really need any more reason? Anyway, today I'm going to find out what you get when you pay $1.7 million for a car. To start, a little background in case you don't know much about the 918 Spyder. This is Porsche's third supercar in the modern era, after the 959 in the 1980s and the Carrera GT in the mid-2000s. When this car was new 2 years ago, the base price was around $860,000, but options could easily push that price over $1 million. Now, that's insane money, but this is an insane car. Back here it has a gas-powered V8 with over 600 horsepower, and it also has two electric motors with almost 300 horsepower. The combined total is 887 horsepower, and you can drive it on purely electric power if you want, and it'll do 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds, and it'll do 211 miles an hour, making it the fastest car I've ever reviewed or driven or sat in. So today I'm going to show you around the 918 Spyder, and I'm going to show you all of its cool quirks and its weird features, and then I'm going to get it out on the road and find out what it's like to drive the ultimate Porsche, maybe the ultimate German car of all time. And of course, for more of my thoughts on the 918 Spyder and the experience of driving a car this valuable, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also got a list of other modern cars currently listed for sale on AutoTrader that have appreciated in value. I'll start by simply getting inside the 918, which is more interesting than you might think. Now, for one, the 918's key is just the regular standard Porsche key fob, the same key you'd get if you bought a base Cayenne for $49,995. Now, to get inside, it's pretty simple. You press the unlock button, and then you reach into this little cubby where you find the door handle, and you open the door right up. But what happens if the battery's dead and the electronics are gone? There's no exterior keyhole. Well, actually there is. It's inside the little door handle cubby. You take the key out of the little Porsche key fob, which interestingly you can't do if it's on a key ring, and then you stick it inside the carefully hidden exterior keyhole in order to open your 918 Spyder if the battery is dead. Now that we're inside the car, we start with the steering wheel. Now the steering wheel isn't that unusual for a Porsche. It has the Porsche logo in the middle of it, 3 spokes. It seems like a fairly normal steering wheel, but there are a few quirks. On the left side, you will find 3 buttons. The top button is for cruise control, on and off. There is actually a little hidden button for some more adjustments on the side. Below it is a button marked M. That's for manual mode. If you want the transmission to go into manual mode, you push the little M button, and then you can use the paddles to shift, and it won't shift for you. Below that is a little button with a diamond on it. You may be wondering, what is that thing? The HOV lane button? No, it's called the Joker button. And you can program it to do anything you want inside the car's central infotainment screen. That's right, Porsche calls it the Joker button. It's one of the strangest names I've ever heard given to an interior car control. On the right side of the steering wheel, you'll find the other cool quirk, which is a little wheel with a red button inside it. The wheel is labeled EHS&R, which stands for Electric, Hybrid, Sport, and Racing. It's different drive modes for the car, and yes, electric lets you drive it in fully electric mode with no gasoline engine at all. But the really cool thing is that little red button inside that wheel. It's called hot lap mode. You press it, and you get a little extra juice from the electric motors for one hot lap or for one fast pass on the highway or on a racetrack. Next, since we're talking drive modes, we better talk transmission selector, which is one of the strangest I've seen. It's mounted to the right of the steering wheel where you would find the ignition in a normal car, and it's just this tiny little lever. It goes between R at the top, N in the middle for neutral, and D at the bottom for drive. When you want to park the car, simply put it in neutral and then press the parking brake and you're parked. Interestingly, this car doesn't have a push-button starter like everything else, including Hyundai's. It has a normal key you have to stick in the slot on the left like all the other Porsches. And since we're talking strange buttons and switches, we have to move on to the center controls. Now, the center controls in this car have the same font as the buttons in regular Porsche models, but in this car, they're not buttons. They're all touchscreeny. When the car is off, you can't see them. It's just one black panel. But when you turn it on, all the buttons come to life. Now, the most interesting one of all is the climate controls. This car has dual zone automatic climate controls, but it only has one dial for you to adjust the temperature. So how does it work? Well, you push the dial and then the thing that you're adjusting lights up inside the climate control to let you know what you're changing. Push the dial again, the other one lights up. Push the dial again, the other one lights up, and you can change it as you push the dial. That isn't the most intuitive solution I've ever seen, but it does clean up the center controls and ensure that it isn't full of fussy switches and dials and buttons like in some other cars. And since I'm talking about the climate controls, I might as well address another one of the interior's strangest things. That would be the climate control vents. Now, like most cars, there is a climate control vent to the left of the steering wheel for the driver and a climate control vent on the far right for the passenger. That's normal, but because of this giant center control stack, where do you put the climate control vent in the middle? Well, it's hidden. It's at the very top of the dashboard, one tiny little vent, only an inch high. And because this is a pretty small cabin, that actually works pretty well, although it's worth noting you can't direct the air and send it onto you or onto your passenger. It chooses where to go instead. And since I'm talking about the functionality of the center controls, it's worth mentioning that with a little slide of your finger above the center controls, you can adjust the little screen that's at the top of the dashboard. You can look at, for instance, the map, you can look at the radio, the current time, and the car status. You can also make the screen smaller or larger, and you can adjust its position, although as you can see here, it isn't quite the easiest thing to do. These touchscreen things have improved a lot even since 2015. More interesting controls, something else I like is that the little buttons on the top of the center control stack pull up a picture of the car showing exactly what they're doing when you push them. For example, if you push the little button for the suspension mode, it shows the suspension getting sportier or less sporty in the center screen. And speaking of that center screen, it's worth noting that this car has not one, not two, but 4 info screens that you can adjust and look at in order to see various different things. There are 2 in the gauge cluster. One is over on the left, and it's controlled by a little button on the left of the steering wheel. The other is on the right, controlled by a button on the right of the steering wheel. The other is the one in the middle I just showed you, and the 4th is the one at the top of the center control stack. My favorite of these screens is the one to the left of the gauge cluster. Apparently they had a big contract with the screen company, but they had run out of stuff to actually put in these screens. So in that one, you can choose between 2 things. One is you can set a speed limit so you don't accidentally violate the speed limit if you're driving near with a lot of police. The other is it just displays what number 918 Spyder you have. That's good info when you're driving down the road. And by the way, the screen at the top of the center controls does exactly what you'd think. It's a touch screen, and it displays for you the radio station, for example, and allows you to change it. It displays all sorts of vehicle functions like interior lighting and exterior lighting and the sounds the car makes, and that little joker key that I talked about before on the steering wheel. It shows you a map at the navigation system of where you are and all sorts of other vehicle functions that you'd expect from a center touchscreen. And next up, let's talk cup holder. Yes, this car has a cup holder. It sticks out of the center control stack, and it's actually pretty sturdy, and it can hold a reasonable sized drink. The interesting thing about this cup holder is it's detachable. If you don't want it there, you can get rid of it, although it doesn't fold up, and instead you just cast it aside, and then you can use it to hold drinks, I don't know, in your house. You do have a little storage area inside. It's this center console box, and it is just about the tiniest storage area I've ever seen inside any car. I don't even know why they bothered. Now, the other interesting center console area is this one in here in the middle. It's completely open underneath this center control stack. You can reach over and touch your driver or passenger's legs depending on where you're sitting. It's kind of an interesting feature. You can't put anything in there. It's just open so you can see through it. Next up, because of this car's electric powertrain, you don't just have a tachometer and a fuel gauge like you do in every other car. You have a battery life gauge that tells you how much battery is left. That is pretty obvious. My favorite additional gauge is there's a little gauge that shows you how hard the electric motors are working. So when you floor it, the tachometer shoots up, and so does the electric power gauge. It's kind of cool to watch. There's also, in the middle of the gauge cluster, a little charge display. This car can recharge itself as it drives using braking and the engine, and so when you're recharging, the little charge icons light up to show that you're recharging the batteries. It's a brave new world when a supercar has all that. Now, it's worth noting that the production number of your 918 Spyder doesn't just appear in that little screen inside the gauge cluster. It also appears inside the car in the driver's footwell on the center tunnel, and in the center tunnel on the passenger footwell. So you'll never forget exactly what number 918 you have. It also appears back here on your hood. Yes, that's right. This is your hood. You see all this back here? It doesn't open. You can't open it. If you want to go and actually look at the engine in your 918 Spyder, you got to take it to the dealer and they can open it. Instead, this is the only panel that opens. To open it, you push a little button on the driver's